Hello and welcome back to 001 Radio Weekly. This time we've made it to week number 14. A whole 14 weeks. And we're going to be talking about some crazy topics. And by crazy, they're not that crazy. It's just games that don't respect the player's time and games that do.
They're wild.
Whoa!
I'm having a good time already.
I am your host, Ryan, and I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts, Wyatt.
My name is that name.
Ben.
Hello.
And Alex.
Oh, we're already off to a good start.
We're off to the races. All right. So it's that time of the week, folks. We have a game. Every week we do a game. We can't go a week without doing the game.
As much as we all hate it. Ryan
even the week that I forgot about the game, we did the game at the end of the podcast instead.
You saved it in quotations.
Yep, I saved it for later. Played it off very smooth. So this week we have the game Find the Grind. It's about games that take the longest time. So I'm going to give you a handful of games, and I want you to tell me in order from shortest to longest how long it takes to do a completionist run of that game.
Like 100 %, dude.
Yeah,
like
100% run. Okay.
100%.
Or as possible to 100% as you can for that game. We're going off of the how long to beat completionist runtime, which can mean a lot of things, but generally as close to 100% as possible. All right. So I'm going to give you some games. We got, first of all, we have to include, of course, a long JRPG. But why include only one when we can include two, especially two from the same series?
Right.
Persona 4 Golden and Persona 5 Royale. Those are our first two games. And the reason they're grouped together is because they're actually just one game. They have the exact same completionist time. So you don't need to separate them. Just say the Persona series. Next, we have The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This game can be deceptive. Remember, there are 900 Korok seeds.
Right.
Then we've got another Nintendo hit, the Metroid Prime trilogy.
I have a problem with this game already.
Yep.
We're comparing 3 video games.
Well, you're comparing 5. I didn't say the other 2 yet.
No. You're 3 video games as one video game.
3 video. Well, the Metroid Prime trilogy is because it was sold as the Metroid Prime trilogy on the Wii.
I see. Okay.
It's one disc.
So all I'm saying is the validity of this experiment is very low.
It's questionable.
So those watching at
These
home,
games aren't meant to be
those watching
valid.
at home, just when I get it wrong, don't.
I never took you to be the guy that complains about our news game.
Yeah.
I can't believe you're that bitch. You're that bitch.
All right, and then we got 2 more games. I gotta say, we have Baldur's Gate 2: Shadows of Amn, an oldie, and then we've got Bloodborne.
Right. So we have to guess their exact.
No, just order them from longest to shortest. Shortest to longest. Just tell me which one you're doing.
I mean, Persona's a long boy.
Mm-hmm. See, this is tough because there's a lot of games on this list that I haven't played, so it's hard for me to gauge.
Bot W is also a long one.
Yeah, you also have to remember with Persona, there's a limited amount of time you can play the game before completing it, because they're time limited.
That's true. Still a long game. Though I've only played 5. I have not played 4.
Well, the time is exactly the same. So.
Okay. Sorry. Say them again.
That's true.
Persona. Because it's a lot to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got Persona, we got Breath of the Wild, Baldur's Gate 2, Bloodborne, and the Metroid Prime trilogy.
I think Breath of the Wild is going to be up there. I think we're safe to put that 1 or 2 spot.
I'm going to say that's my number 1, just because I sunk a lot of hours into it, and I still had a lot more to do. And it's really the only game that I'm super familiar with on this list, so yeah.
What was the next to last one before Metroid?
Before Metroid, Baldur's Gate 2.
No one.
Persona Breath of the Wild.
My thought here is Baldur's Gate not going to be that long because why? It was made on old hardware and they could only have 1 disc. No chance they had a lot of big game on that. So that one was 10 hours long. Now,
I will say I limited the category of time in this search to 50-hour minimum.
Oh, so that one was 50 hours long, and
Okay.
I don't know. I'm saying Breath of the Wild is probably the longest, just because you brought up that big old number about the seeds or whatever. I don't even know what that means.
And is that because the thing about Breath of the Wild too is that it's like
You
in
can
the first
technically complete it
playthrough-
in like an hour.
well, I'm even talking about like 100% playthrough because like a lot of the things takes a while to
Yeah,
find.
so
even
I
if you have the
think
general
100%
area.
is not actually getting all 900 Korok seeds. It's getting all the inventory upgrades, which takes about half of them.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. Because like 100% you got to find all the shrines, but like finding one shrine can take a while, even if you're in like
Yeah.
roughly the right area.
All
are
right,
these
so
record completion times or average completion time?
it is an average of a lot of people.
Okay.
All right, so
Yeah,
let's start with Wyatt. Let's let Wyatt run through his list.
All right. So bottom to top, I kind of like the line of thinking that Ben has. So
Okay.
I'm gonna say Baldur's Gate at the bottom, and then I'm gonna do Metroid Prime trilogy, and then what do we got? We got Breath. What do I have left?
Breath of the Wild,
Persona.
Persona, and Bloodborne.
Okay. Then I'm gonna put Persona. No. I'm gonna put Bloodborne, then Persona, then Breath of the Wild.
Okay. All right, Ben. Let's give us.
I honestly, I'm jumping on the bandwagon, baby. I agree. I think that's pretty solid.
Good order.
If
All right.
anything, you want just to switch it up so we have a better chance of winning this game among the three of us. I'm going to switch Bloodborne and Persona. So I think Bloodborne's longer than Persona.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Alex. It's your turn. What is your order?
Let's see. I'm mainly basing this off of character movement speed relative to the size of the world. I'm getting very scientific about this. I
Okay.
have a list.
Look at you.
Bloodborne, Persona, Breath of the Wild, Metroid Prime, Baldur's Gate.
From shortest to longest or longest to
From
shortest?
longest to shortest.
Okay. So I'll let you know all of you got Baldur's Gate wrong. By a
okay.
significant
I hate
margin. Baldur's Gate is
I
a
don't-
very long game.
Yeah, okay. When I played Baldur's Gate, I was 12. I don't know how time worked.
And I never played Baldur's
story
Gate,
of
and I
Baldur's
was just
Gate,
listening to this silly boy.
the main story of Baldur's Gate 2 is a 69-hour story, according to this list.
69.
God.
That is not the completionist run. The
That's
completionist run
wrong,
is apparently 136 hours,
Oh my god.
which is just above the below, which is Bloodborne, and Bloodborne only takes 77 hours.
for a completionist run?
Yeah, because I mean, Bloodborne, the gameplay is what will keep you there, but you've completed the game after you've gotten all the items and everything, right? Which it doesn't
Oh,
take.
dude, I just do mine entirely backwards.
Yeah, it
See,
doesn't
I was
take
adding
nearly
on
as
time
long as
for
you might think.
Bloodborne because of like the difficulty and having to redo something to like
Yeah,
unlock certain things. And-
Why-
and
why
again,
am
I haven't-
talking about a 72-hour game as if that's short.
we are. It's a
Well,
short game.
I mean, in
Uh,
comparison,
In comparison,
Metroid Prime
sure, but
Trilogy is by far the shortest. It's 66 hours for a completionist run.
yeah.
And then we had
I can
the
see
Persona games were tied for second place at 141 hours, and Breath of the Wild is in first place with 184 hours. I was gonna put The Witcher 3 in this list as well, but The Witcher 3 is a runaway lead with 190 hours, so I was like, it's a
Oh,
little
wow.
too easy.
Well, it's
That's
only
an
got
easy
6
call.
hours on the Breath of the Wild.
well, I probably still would have put maybe Witcher 3 is like second or first, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the important thing with The Witcher 3 is it's got a bunch of really long DLC, so it lasts a very long
Oh
time.
yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and tons of skill trees and stuff. So that was our game. You guys did pretty poorly.
Yeah, we did. Okay,
Yep.
I get it.
Yeah.
Hey,
It's
I
see,
don't
it's about as
finish my
poorly
games.
as a job as Ben is doing, staying at the same distance to his mic.
oh,
You know, these are the things that can be a little bit nicer about them.
There's no coming back from that. Let's just continue.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So our topic for today, if you didn't read the title of the podcast, which I can't blame you for doing, maybe you're just listening to all of it in a row. Our topic is games that do or don't respect the player's time, which can kind of be in the same vein as grinding. So we got a few things to talk about here. I think most of us have played Destiny at some point in our lives.
Aha.
If not all of us. I think all of
Yeah.
us have played Destiny.
Yeah.
Destiny is up there in things to talk about games that don't respect the player's time. Uh,
Well,
so we're still
it's a
there.
funny it's a funny like thing with Destiny because a lot of people say like, "Oh, it's totally worth your money because there's so many hours in it." But it's like that's less relevant. Is what you're doing worth your time though?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, like as a free to play product or even as like what you pay for it now, there's a ton of hours involved. But how many of those hours,
are you
do you
really
really
enjoying?
do you really care about? Like if I'm playing through a game and I can, you know, listen to Best of the Worst or a podcast on the side while I'm playing it, I'm thinking to myself like, am I really valuing this time that I'm putting in right now? You
Yeah,
know?
I think that's definitely a fair point. I know a lot of people like to have what they call podcast games, which is a
Mhm.
game that's maybe doesn't take your full attention all the time, or is something that's like turn based where you can kind of like divide your attention between that and something in the other monitor, or something that you're listening to. Like for me, that's Civilization and Mountain Blade tend to be those types of games. Or once
Mhm.
I've hit the gameplay loop, I like to just play them because it's fun, and then have something else that I'm doing.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think with Destiny, it's more of a Destiny asks you to spend so much time doing anything to get a single reward that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
really feel like you're not getting rewarded for the effort you're putting in.
I think
It's
it's also
yeah.
one of the things that matters most is if you're having fun doing what you're doing, like, because I feel like a lot of the stuff in
Yeah.
Destiny is just grindy, just boring crap. Where
Mhm.
it's like, even though I don't need to pay full attention to Total War, and I can have like a podcast on in the back, and like I'm not 100% engaged, I'm still enjoying my time with the game.
Yeah.
Like, I
Sure.
don't think,
Sure.
Total War is super grindy, even though a campaign can go for 100 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 100 hours is still very engaging.
Right.
And Destiny's like incessant stinginess is so annoying to me because
Yeah.
I was playing a bunch of Destiny right before Borderlands 3 came out, and then I started playing Borderlands 3 and I was like, "Oh my god, like I've been missing the fact that they just throw weapons with reckless abandon at you every 2 seconds." Like it was such a nice feeling of like this game it doesn't have any kind of like competitive multiplayer, so balance is like in some respects it's completely out the window, so it just throws guns at you constantly, and it was such a nice like change. It was such a nice feeling, and it was really difficult to go back to Destiny after that.
Yeah.
you
I
know
think for me it's a very similar situation of I was playing a ton of Destiny when Destiny 2 came out, and in the lead up to Destiny 2 coming out, and then I'll revisit it once every like 3 months and play for a little while and try to do a like seasonal quest, and then I'll realize that I know the big one for me was the season armor. A while ago, you could get like armor glows,
Mhm.
and they would evolve as you played more. But some of the mission objectives for doing them were just so tedious. It was stuff like you'd have to play 50 Gambit matches over the course of like a month, and I just don't want to do that if I prefer doing PvE stuff.
Yeah.
It's just not something I like to engage with very much. It's not what I find enjoyable about the game, but the game is forcing me to do it.
Yeah, and it's just you're putting in so much time for what feels like such small minute rewards. it's
Yeah.
it's very
Destiny also
frustrating.
doesn't have a lot of ridiculous exotics or anything because they have to balance for PvP as well.
Yeah.
Which I kind of
And
wish they would take the stance of balancing drastically differently for PvE and PvP.
Mhm.
But I feel like that definitely won't happen. At least
and
as
it's
far
such
as
a
it's been going.
Yeah, and it's such a weird case with Destiny as well because I feel like the really high level of quality that they have for themselves while making Destiny content is kind of hindering them because they're asking you to put in so much time. And the thing about it is that I would be way more okay with it if there was more things to do, but you're doing the same strikes, the same things on
Yeah.
the same maps with the same enemies and the same guns. It just doesn't have enough content. And it's like one of the only things I can think of in my mind where it's like you guys have set a really high bar for yourself in terms of quality, and it's really hindering the overall experience in a way.
Yeah.
I never thought I would complain about like them spending too much time on something, but it feels like they are because there's not enough content for the amount of hours you're putting in terms of variety specifically.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think especially with the Beyond Light removing a lot of the old content, especially like the entire campaign, is something that is probably going to be a pretty major misstep in at least the short term. It might pay out long run, but I feel like all the players that would pick up Destiny 2 when it's on sale to play the campaign are just completely uninterested now, because they're going to get into the game and have like, they'll do a strike that's referring to things in these campaigns that don't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you know,
which will be wild.
To be fair, Destiny players are
arms dealer.
Destiny players are pretty used to that, though. You know, missions and stuff, you know, referencing things that they don't understand because they didn't take the time to read the lore.
I don't think that makes it a good thing, though.
No, it's not. I mean, that was more of a joke than anything.
Yeah. I just want to make it very clear that it's not necessarily the solution to say that it's something players expect, so it's what they do. Or it's something players are used to. I think so Destiny is often compared to another game called Warframe, which is free to play, and also has a very grind-heavy gameplay loop. And it doesn't necessarily force you to do stuff like PvP if you enjoy PvE, but you do have to do different activities to get your stuff together. And the one problem I've always had with Warframe is that in order to get a lot of the really fun weapons, you have to be part of a giant clan that has clan research and everything. So if you're just playing with your friends, it's a lot less easy to get that kind of thing.
The price that you have to pay for some of the not expansions, but just one armor piece can cost around $60.
Yeah, I think for Warframe, that's not exactly how it is. So the $60 armor pieces are part of something called Prime Access Packs, which are intended for people that have the money to essentially throw away at the developers to fund the development of the game, because those are not things they expect people to buy. They're also not things that I think the average player buys, because in Warframe you can get a lot of the great armor and stuff without having to do any of that stuff. You can just play the game. And one of the unique things with it is that it's not really unique, but one of the nice things is that you can always get the premium currency by selling items that you found to players that have the premium currency. So you don't have to buy the currency if you want to buy premium things. So it has ways around that, but it's still a very, very grind-heavy game, and I think that's like eventually why I stopped playing it, is because the grind just became too much.
That's why I never really got into it. It's because you had to put in so long to get into a new Warframe, and that's kind of like the cool part of the game.
And you have such limited space if you don't, have any, don't put any money into it.
That is a big problem I have with it, is that you have a limited amount of slots for weapons and Warframes if you don't either find a way to quickly acquire stuff you can sell for the currency or buy some so you can make new slots.
Yeah, I ended up soft locking myself because I was in the middle of 2 different frame acquisition quests, and I didn't have enough space for anything.
I think they've updated it now, so most of the frame acquisition stuff gives you a slot if it's a quest.
Huh.
I think, and both of these games suffer from the larger.
And I keep going back to it because of that, and then I keep getting disappointed because of the space handling issue.
Yeah, and I think both of these games suffer from the larger problem of they're designed with the expectation that that's the only game you're playing.
Yeah.
That's how
or that you have like 8 hours a day to play video games, which I feel like is not true for most people.
No.
Yeah, and inherently there's nothing wrong with that, but it just immediately you turn off so many people just because you're expecting so much more out of them than they have to give. And for some people that's fine and they're rewarded for doing that, but for a lot of people it's like, I don't have the time or the money for this, and that's a shame.
You lose a lot of potential audience.
Perhaps the game just isn't for you. Is that a valid argument in this situation?
I think that's a valid argument for gameplay. I think a lot of the time when it comes to stuff like Warframe and Destiny, they're legitimate complaints of the game is, even people that really love the game Like I've spent probably, I think I have like 100 something hours in Destiny, and I would certainly have a lot more if I actually felt like my time was being rewarded.
Right.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been playing Destiny since launch day of Destiny 1.
The main
And
attraction to it is being able to play it with friends, which is the thing. If you can't get a friend group together to play it.
yeah, and the thing is that like the core gameplay loop isn't the problem, because Destiny and Warframe, not to a lesser extent
Yeah,
with Warframe,
they're
but
both
like
really fun.
yeah, they're really really fun, but you can only stretch really solid mechanics and a really good foundation so far before it's stretched way too thin over
Yeah.
your jar lid or whatever. It's too much. Like there's not enough to support the amount of time you're expected to put in from like a variety perspective. I can't say with Warframe because I haven't played a lot of it, because it's like I don't have the time for this. But I have with Destiny, and yeah, with Destiny, it's like I can't tell you how many times I've heard the exact same lines of dialogue doing Savathun's song just constantly, and it turns a mission which I thought was actually really interesting and creative, especially for a Destiny strike, especially from a narrative perspective. I thought it was really interesting, and now it's just mundane, and it's just a whole lot of nothing, because I've played it so many times that there was actually some cool like twists and kind of an emotional core there, and it's completely gone now because I've just had to play it so many times.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I think Warframe kind of gets around that problem by having the randomly generated missions and a much wider array of different types of content than Destiny does, whereas Destiny pretty much sticks to the strikes and raids, although the raids in Destiny I think are way more fun than most of the activities in Warframe, aside from like Warframe's big single player quest lines.
Mm-hmm.
But they're two very different approaches.
Yeah, and if you have the time and you get the people together, raids are just awesome. Like some of my best moments of like playing multiplayer games with friends has come out of doing raids. But that's the thing, is that raids,
there's only a couple.
Right. But like, the thing about raids, first of all, yeah, there's only a couple, and B, I mean, my first run of Leviathan, which is the first raid I ever did with a group of people who knew what they were doing, was 8 hours.
Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous, and there's no matchmaking. You have to get people together in order to go through it, which is understandable because you need communication, especially for Leviathan. You need communication or else you're screwed. But it's there's such a big hurdle to get the really good gear that you get from it, and also to get probably the best designed stuff in the game from a gameplay perspective, and
which is now about to be obsolete.
Yeah. They're doing all the changes that are making a lot of that.
Well, they did say that Raid 7 is going to be, not sunset as soon as everything else, but it's still going to be sunset relatively soon.
Yeah.
And
I think is one of my biggest issues with it is, at least in Warframe, things take a long time, but you know that the weapon, even if it's not the best weapon in the meta, will still be usable and fun if you enjoy it, and they're not going to suddenly delete it. Yeah, I think that's a big issue Destiny's facing right now, and I think they've put themselves in a weird situation of not really having a good solution to this.
Yeah, well, it was never their idea, at least from what I understand. I don't think they wanted to do a sequel at first, but when they did start on a sequel, they wanted to have all the original content and then kind of build off of that.
Yeah.
But it was massively swapped around in the middle of development, because a Destiny game can't be made without crazy insane development period. But they wanted to have all that. Now they're bringing it all back, but now they're finding that they can't add more to it because there's too much.
Which makes me kind of sad, because I think one of my issues with Destiny 2 specifically is that the engine definitely feels like it could be improved. And I'm worried that doing this whole extension of Destiny 2's lifespan is going to mean we don't really get a new engine for Destiny going forward, which is worrying.
Yeah. And it's kind of a tough call, I think, because I never really understood the point of making a sequel to a game like Destiny, because like Warframe's probably never going to get a sequel. They're just going to keep adding.
But they've also, Warframe has reworked their engine a bunch of times, and I don't think Destiny's done anything close to that.
Oh no, not at all. But it's everyone was pissed when they weren't able to carry over their characters, which is entirely understandable. It's I guess what I'm saying, I'm very much on the fence in terms of like, yeah, if they keep sticking with this engine and they don't really fix it and they want to stick out with Destiny 2 content, they're not going to be able to fix a lot of the problems that the game has. But a sequel, give them a fresh, a clean slate and no Activision, they could do some incredible things with a Destiny sequel. But again, you're asking everyone to zero out their characters and start all the way over again.
And you're also asking the company to not be making content for basically their only moneymaker right now for a period of time to make this new thing, which might sell really, really well, but they won't have a constant influx of cash from stuff like the Eververse and all that.
Yeah. I think
people have their own opinions on stuff like the Eververse, but it does help support the development.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people tend to forget that like one of the most difficult games to develop is a game with like a live service like this. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it causes
server
all
costs
sorts of problems.
are incredibly expensive as well. Which is why a lot of companies, when you have those huge networking issues on launch days, it's because the server capacity is aimed at the capacity of the game that will be their normal capacity usually, and they don't prepare for the massive influx of players that'll play the game for a day or a week and then quit.
Yeah.
I mean, economically, that's probably makes the most
sense.
sense.
It makes sense because then they're not paying for that huge server cost.
Right.
But then you look at it from a consumer perspective and they just pay
maybe
$60 or
players.
whatever.
Because you could lose people that might have gotten really into it, but they can't play on launch day, and they refund the game. So you lose players.
It's a tough situation.
And again, I think Warframe's benefit is that it was designed when it was initially coming out as this huge thing that would expand over time. And I don't think Destiny 2 was designed that way because they had plans for a 3.
Yeah.
So I think they didn't expect to have to rework this game into a much larger framework.
I didn't think they really knew what Destiny was when it was released, to be honest with you. It's very much like...
There's all the stories about Destiny's development, like things got really, really refactored in that final year of development.
It echoes a lot of what happened to Anthem, interestingly enough.
Yeah, at least Destiny came out as a solid product, though.
Well, vanilla Destiny 1, I wouldn't say was solid, but...
I would put it at a higher tier than Anthem. Like, I played Destiny 1 when it came out and had a lot of fun with it, but it was like it was a game that you would kind of complete and not come back to. It wasn't really something that I would keep playing day after day.
Well, yeah, it was a game with a good foundation to it. You could tell that there was a good foundation to it. There just wasn't a whole lot that was done with it. Whereas like Anthem has so many core problems that it would be very difficult to have that be as like a starting point for your live service game, just because it was so like flawed from a very like core level,
Yeah.
I think it was just a bad game.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Why was it a bad game? It's because there were so many
bad.
A lot of the development
Didn't
issues.
work.
But saying it's bad doesn't. It's not constructive criticism.
Okay, but it doesn't deserve it because it was a bad game.
For development is that Anthem had like a good concept, but it had so many issues in development. It came out in this weird half-baked state. They didn't really know how to sell the game to people, so they sold it as like 5 different things.
I don't know.
People
My
were
problem with the
expecting
game,
like this weird
it just obviously
Destiny-like
wasn't
thing.
done.
Well, yeah, and there's like, one thing that was really eye-opening to me was, because I only played the beta, right? But while I was playing the beta, I was like, you have this really cool flying mechanic, but you don't do anything with it. You just get from point A to point B.
And the world locks you from going too high, which is the crazy thing. Like, you can't...
I thought the flying mechanic was kind of jank, to be honest.
It was the best part of the game, at least for me. But when you read more about the development of the game, it makes perfect sense, because the flying was taken in and out of development, out of the game so many times that they probably didn't have enough time to develop missions with flying in it at all, because they didn't even know if flying was going to be in it for the longest time.
And it was super restrictive too. You ran out of your flight almost instantaneously.
Probably because they shoved it in last minute.
For it.
Wasn't designed for it, so they had to really restrict it.
Yep. And I think the big thing I regret with Anthem is that from stuff in the beta, there were some really cool moments. Like I remember playing the Storm frame or whatever it was. I don't remember what they called them. The suit, and it had this cool thing that the others didn't have. Of you would have a really long hover time in the air, so you could get above your enemies and like rain thunder on them from above. Whereas the giant big guy suit would basically stay to the ground and just run in head first and go crazy. So it had some cool gameplay loop elements, but they just weren't. They stopped being interesting after about an hour.
Yeah, I'll definitely say, like, if you look at the different javelins as classes, they're definitely more distinct than Destiny's 3 classes. You know, like in terms of what kind of gameplay style they promote, they definitely, because the weird thing about Destiny's classes is that they're different, but they're not like.
If you play one Destiny class, you kind of know how to play all of them.
I mean, there is some significant changes, like how their jump works and grenade works, but like they're built to support any kind of play style for all 3 classes.
And like the shooting is different. You don't have access to different weapons generally.
Yeah, which I thought, they were going to be doing that when Destiny 2 first came out, because I saw like that big. Yeah, I saw that big like auto rifle that was like a minigun, and I was like, oh, that's a perfect Titan weapon. Like that is such a Titan looking weapon. It would be perfect for that. And then I picked it up as a hunter, and I was like, this feels weird. I don't think a hunter should be carrying a giant Gatling gun. It feels strange, Yeah,
I think it's definitely a fair point. So we've talked a lot about shooters. So I kind of want to shift genres towards a game I know at least 2 of us are very familiar with, called Path of Exile.
Is that a whole genre now?
Well, the genre is action RPGs, but Path of Exile is the game. Because action RPGs in general tend to be very grind-heavy games. Like you can even Borderlands 3 fits into this. Destiny kinda fits in. I wouldn't quite put it on the same gameplay mechanic level as them, but Path of Exile is a game I know Ben and I have spent a lot of time in. And I think one of the biggest reasons why I keep coming back to Path of Exile is it feels like it treats my time as a legitimate thing instead of how a lot of other free-to-play games don't, like Warframe.
I think one of the best parts about Path of Exile in that regard is that the content itself is relatively short, and I feel like you can feel fairly fulfilled in your character creation. Like you can get to a pretty good end game state within the content. So like you play the game, you get your content, and if you really like the gameplay loop, you can go do all the extra grinding stuff afterwards. But there's no time during the content, save for certain builds if you want to do something crazy, like that you need to stop and grind out the same level over and over and over again.
Unless you're like a Path of Exile streamer who's playing it 8 hours a day.
Well, no, but the thing is they rush content and then they do maps. So it's like they have a game and then they have an end game, where some other games are just like the whole thing is the end game and you're just grinding all the time. Yeah. So I think that's a good thing.
I think the big benefit that Path of Exile has is it almost has this like roguelike element of every 3 months the game resets.
I mean, the wipes are a huge part of why the game stays fresh.
So every 3 months they reset the league, move all your characters into the permanent league, so you can go back and play your characters if you want to. They're not gone or anything. And then they add a new league with new mechanics, a new interesting twist or something. And then you can make a temporary character on that league that'll last for that 3-month period. And you can you earn rewards by doing challenges up to a certain point, and you don't really feel bad for stopping, because if you miss it, if it's not great content, it won't be added to the main game. If it's good, you'll get it into the main game in a few months. So you're never really missing anything important. And it offers you a lot of fun ways to like replay the fun stuff. Yeah. It's an interesting tactic that I think works really well for that game. I don't know if it would work for... It probably wouldn't work for a lot of things, because I feel like people wouldn't like having to replay Destiny 2's campaign.
Works really well in Tarkov.
Yeah, Tarkov's a good example.
Of course, Tarkov is in development still, so whether or not that wipe cycle is going to continue, we don't know. But the way it works right now, I think it offers a really good gameplay loop for the most part. Again, people will argue on that, but
yeah. And I think another benefit that Path of Exile has is its monetization scheme is not nearly as grabby as Warframes is. It's pretty similar to Destiny 2's of it mostly being cosmetics. But Warframe does the thing where you can get your frames by grinding for however many hours in the game, or you can buy them for $10 and get your new fancy gun. Whereas PoE, you don't have anything like that affecting gameplay. It's all just cosmetic or convenience things like having a bigger inventory space in your stash.
But I mean, cosmetics is such a big part of those games, though.
Yeah, I think with
Yeah.
ARPGs it's a little different because your character is very small and not a huge part of the screen. And PoE also has the benefit of if you get one cosmetic that works on all your characters forever.
Mhm.
So if you do get something, you don't have to worry about losing access to it or using it on the wrong thing because you'll be able to swap it around whenever you want. Which is nice because I think a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll get one like $30 supporter pack, and then they'll use that costume they get with that pack on whatever they play.
Mhm.
Whereas usually the people spending a lot of money are streamers or people that play the game a ton, which works to support the game. I mean, it's a monetization model that works really well for Path of Exile. I don't know how successful it would be in any other genre.
Mhm.
And I think there's also the benefit of Path of Exile. If you get any unique items, they have their own appearances. It's not like they look bad or anything, but the normal armor in Path of Exile certainly looks bad.
Yeah, it does. Some of the higher end stuff looks alright.
Yeah, but it fits the aesthetic of the game. Path of Exile is a
Yeah.
very like dejected, dark Diablo 2-esque RPG,
Mhm.
whereas Destiny is like Space Warriors,
Yeah.
Space Crusades.
Although it is shocking that speaking, personally, this is very subjective, but like a lot of Destiny's armor sets just look bad. Like
Yeah, I agree with
just
you.
trash. Like a lot of the stuff you get from like the EDZ where it's like, oh, you've got some like torn up boots or something like that.
Toss some
I don't know, man.
some rope on your shoulder and call it a cloak.
Yeah. Yeah. Where did all the cool cloaks go? As a hunter guy, where the heck did all the cool cloaks go?
They all went to Endgame.
I don't even think they're in the end game.
No, they're all short or just like stupid looking.
Yeah, I definitely prefer Destiny 1's armor, especially the stuff like the raid armor in Destiny 1 was fantastic.
Well, yeah, because it stuck to that like Knights in Space kind of
Yeah.
aesthetic where
And it
Destiny
was
2
very fantasy feeling. Like it wasn't just sticking to sci-fi. You
Yeah.
got some crazy stuff that looked like it was very much like you got the Crota aesthetic gear that was really cool.
I don't even
and-
know what Destiny 2 is trying to go for in some of its sets. It
Yeah,
looks-
it feels very
bizarre.
disconnected.
Yeah.
It almost like a lot of it is scavengy. Very like put together, scrapped together. It doesn't look very well made.
which looks fine if you're starting the campaign from scratch and you
Yeah,
don't
but
have
when I'm
your
in
light,
game and I've played the game for 800 hours.
and I've got these like boots that are taped to my legs, it's like
Yeah.
it's a little unsatisfying.
Especially because you can only equip one piece of unique gear at a time, so you can't
Yeah.
really deck yourself out in all the cool looking stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping they added a nice transmog system with Beyond Light, which I think they said they're looking into.
I hope they just go nuts with more armor ornaments. to be
Yeah, I
honest
think
with
the
you.
big thing that worries me is a lot of that's being put into Eververse,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I
Well,
always feel in games like Destiny 2, I don't use the cosmetics from the store because I would much rather show off something that I earned from playing.
Yeah.
Like raid gear.
Well, one of the big things that they said they were also going to change in Beyond Light was taking away ornaments from the Eververse too, and being able to earn ornaments in game
Good. That's
Yeah.
good.
throughout progression.
Because
Which- I hope they implement immediately in Beyond Light, but they also said that transmog would be coming later in year 4. So
Yeah, I don't know.
'Cause-
I hope they do change that kind of stuff.
because it really bugs me when and this is kind of the case for any game, but especially games like Destiny where cosmetics are so important. When someone makes the argument, oh well, it's just cosmetics, so like who cares? It's like, yeah, but like cosmetics is like 50% of why you play the game is to make
That's
your character look.
do you not
It's-
understand this?
It's ridiculous. It's such a big part of the game. It's like brushing it off as, oh well, it's all microtransaction based, but whatever. It's just cosmetics. It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, God.
I think how Path of Exile gets around that is your skill effects are most of what looks cool, and a lot of the base skill effects generally look really good. So that you don't feel like you're missing out if you don't have the cosmetic thing. Like, usually the cosmetics are more jokey stuff. Like, you might get one of the interesting ones is they did a spell that shoots out this like tracking ball. One of the cosmetics you can get is that ball is now a cat. So if you want to shoot cats at people, you can. It's the kind of goofy stuff like that where I feel like a lot of people would rather just have the normal effect.
It has a lot to do, I think, with if the cosmetics are also a part of the gameplay loop, because Path of Exile, you don't get cosmetics. You get new armor sets that look different because they are different types of armor. Like, you don't really make your character look good. You really just pick your best armor. And then the cosmetics are just totally separate from your armor and equipment.
Yeah.
They just make you look different. Destiny, it's like you can customize your armor and stuff to make yourself look good, and you find cosmetics probably in the game loop and stuff, and then you can buy them as well outside of it. So
yeah, I think especially in the case of Destiny, one of the things that was it was a weird thing that really affected my enjoyment was that shaders were now limited use consumables.
Yeah,
that was such an odd decision to me, because I mean I get why they did it to prolong the grind, but it made me never want to use them.
Well, because they wanted you to spend money on them. I think that's the larger, because I forgot exactly how they did it.
I've never heard of anyone spend money on a shader.
You could, though. I don't know if you
can
now.
The coolest ones were always stuff like strike shaders and raid shaders. Not really the Eververse stuff.
It's especially gross when you look at how a lot of like the base armor sets are designed. They have these very boring, drab like color palettes to them, which makes you want to get more shaders. And if there wasn't microtransactions attached to it, I wouldn't complain so much. But the fact that it was just made it feel so gross. Just like, ugh.
For me, it basically turned it into the same thing as playing an RPG like Skyrim or Oblivion, where you gather all these items that are consumable in case you ever need them, and then you don't use them because you're like, what if I need them later though? But what if I need them later? Like, what if I get a better armor set later? I don't want to use my shaders now, because if I get a better armor set, it'll look better on that.
But that's the thing, is that you're constantly tweaking, especially now with Armor 2.0, you're constantly tweaking things. And so you're never going to find a spot where like, okay, I'm satisfied, because there's always going to be new content. There's always going to be new stuff to unlock.
And it's like, I don't want to have to redo the same raid 20 times to get new shaders for my new gear. Like, that's just not something I ever want to have to do.
Yeah, because like, not even speaking of like doing raids themselves, which is like such a mental task because there's so much to a raid, but like just the task of trying to set up enough people to play, because it's 6 people. They all have to be in your friends list, or at least friend of a friend or something like that. There's no matchmaking, so it's such a hassle to set up.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. And I feel like a lot of people gave crap to games like Warcraft or World of Warcraft when they added those matchmaking systems. But I think for casual players or people that only have like an hour a day to play the game, that's so much better, because it lets them get straight to the content they want to play, as long as they've unlocked it. And I also think like in Warcraft's term, they have all these really cool unlockables like pets that you can get for doing these crazy tasks, which I think is a much better way to handle these like raid rewards, where you get it even if you don't get something that affects your gameplay, you might get this weird little pet. Whereas Destiny 2, I feel like they just hide that stuff behind either microtransactions or so much grind that it doesn't become a reward anymore. It just feels like kind of pointless.
Yeah, I can't count how many times it's like, oh, I'm going to go on this like quest to get this weapon or this skin or whatever, and I'm really excited when I start. And then there's so many tasks involved. Like, I remember, oh my God, like, what was that thing when Forsaken came out where you got a bunch of like Cade related stuff?
Oh, Ace of Spades.
Grind for that. Yeah. It was ridiculous. Like, you were excited because you wanted to get all this cool Cade looking stuff.
And the weird thing is, like, Ace of Spades has a final quest that's really good.
Yeah, but there's so much. You have to go through so much crap to get there that you're just not.
You have
in
to
a
play
good
PvP,
mood.
you have to play PvE. They make you engage with all these different systems that if you're the kind of player that doesn't like doing PvP, you're out of luck. Like, you gotta go get kills in PvP with your hand cannon, or else you're not gonna get Ace of Spades, which is one of the best weapons in the game when it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
feel
and
like
it's
that's
like-
definitely not. It's an issue of not respecting the player and letting them choose how they want to do things.
Because it's just you don't care. By the time you unlock the weapon, you're like, "Hooray! I did it finally!" And you're just
It's more
not,
like you're relieved that you don't have to do it again, rather than excited that you got something cool.
Yeah, whenever you're playing a game and you can just and you think to yourself, I don't have to be doing this right now. Like I'm bored, I'm frustrated, and there's literally so many other things I could be doing with myself. So you put down the controller or whatever and you walk away. It's like you failed. From a
Yeah.
game design perspective, you failed.
And I think a lot of games fall into that. Even single player games will have moments that are boring. And in some games, it's worth it to stick it out. Like, if you're playing a game that's got like a 10-hour campaign and 30 minutes of it is really boring, but the rest is great, stick through that 30 minutes. But if you're playing Destiny 2 and you've got like 5 hours of great content, right? But then right in the middle is 10 hours of Gambit that you don't want to play, well, you need to
that's-
seriously consider what you're doing.
And that's the really interesting thing. That's like I like that you brought that up because it reminds me one of my favorite things about Breath of the Wild is that it feels like there's never a wasted second
Yeah.
because of how the story is constructed. Every single thing you do is gearing you up for that final boss. It's not like you're going through a story that's taking too long. No. You can go to that final boss, you can go and fight Ganon whenever the heck you want, and everything you do outside of that castle is getting you ready for that fight. So you never feel like your time is wasted because you're constantly gearing up for that.
Including
It's-
buying a house and building a village.
I mean, that's like side stuff that you don't have to do.
And that's also
right?
its
Like,
own reward. Like, I'm the type of player that
Yeah.
loves having village building quests in my video games. It's one of my
I
favorite
like having a
things.
house. I like having a house to come back to in a game. That's why,
Yeah.
like, whenever I play Skyrim, the first thing I do is get a what's it called
Good
Breeze
old
Home.
Nino Cooney, bro.
It's like the first thing I do is get Breeze Home or whatever it's called in whatever the fuck that town. I forget.
Yeah, Whiterun.
Breeze Home in Whiterun. Thank you. But like that's the first thing I do because I love having a home to come back to. And unlike Destiny, getting the house and building that city and all of that, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. But even then, though, well, actually, you know what? Thinking about it now, you get the Hylian shield from doing that. So like you're
Yep.
still it's giving you great rewards.
And the
to
wild thing
drop
to me,
that.
the Master Sword in Breath of the Wild is optional.
Yeah.
You can just not get it.
So is the Hylian shield.
Yeah. And I think that's a good way of making your content stuff that people
Yeah,
want to engage with. Because, like, I want the Master Sword. I'm a Zelda fan. I want the Master Sword. It doesn't matter if it doesn't do anything. I want it. So I'm going to
Yeah.
go do the quest to get it, as long as that quest is fun. And even then, it's
Yeah.
like, you don't have to do a specific quest. All you have to do is play the game, and then by playing the game, you'll eventually reach the point where you can get the Master Sword. You don't
I
have to,
can't.
but you reach that point.
I'm trying to think of a game that does something like this, where like here's this open world, your final objective, you got to beat this guy, but everything you do is gearing you up towards that, and you can go and beat and fight him whenever you want.
I mean, that's
Like-
the game loop of, I think, 4X games definitely count under there, which, if you haven't played a 4X game or heard of them, it's games like Civilization, or a good game that I'm playing through right now is Mountain Blade or X4, where the goal is essentially to conquer or win the game, but you have a lot of options of how to get there. You can, like, in Mountain Blade, you can make a unit of all archers if you want to go crazy with it, or all melee, all
Plenty of
cavalry.
exploits.
Yeah. So essentially, you have the sandbox that you're set free in, and then you have like a final goal of winning or conquering the map, but you have a lot of different ways to go about it.
And for those of you that are curious, it's called 4X because it stands for exterminate, exploit, expand, and hold on, don't say anything.
Explore, I
it's
think.
explore. Yeah.
Yeah.
something.
Which is I love those games. That's one of my favorite
But-
games. I don't play them all the
but-
time.
I will say Breath of the Wild is unique, and I feel like first of all, I think it
Yeah.
gives you way more freedom to tackle that final objective. But also, it's an action game. It's not a strategy game.
Yeah, that's a good example. Is it's definitely a completely different genre than pretty much anything else that's tried it.
Yeah.
There have definitely been games like it, although I feel like a lot of those games are older and more experimental.
Mhm.
and a lot of them are strategy games. Like 4X's, a lot of old RPGs give you the option of just fighting the final boss whenever you want to. Morrowind is a good example. In Morrowind, you can just go straight up and fight the final boss in 20 minutes. You're probably gonna die very
Right.
quickly,
Right.
but you can, which is like where speedrunning in that game is great.
And
yeah.
it's an important distinction to make as well, I think, because there's a lot of games where it's like, oh yeah, well the story is you're gearing up to fight this boss. It's like, yeah, but the story is still leading you to like, you got to go to this place, you got to go to this place. It's still, even if like the main goal is to fight and kill this one person, like Far Cry, for instance. Far Cry doesn't let you just go up and kill, Pagan Ming or Joseph Seed or whatever. You have to go to these specific spots before you can do that. Zelda's like, nah, screw that. You can go and fight Calamity Ganon in nothing but a pair of trousers and a stick. You're gonna die, but you can do that if you want to.
Yeah, you can give it a try.
And I'm sure
Actually,
there's some
Devil May Cry
crazy
5
people.
does the same thing. Wild thing with that game, you fight one of the final bosses as like the tutorial fight,
Mhm.
and you're extremely weak. You're intended to die in that fight so they can give you the tutorial. But if you don't, you beat the game in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's yeah. And
yeah.
Far Cry, that's it doesn't offer quite as much freedom because like once you get past that tutorial area, you can't fight Joseph until you go through his like his 3 siblings or 4 siblings, right? But even then, that still offers you the freedom in that each sibling or I think it's like brother or family, excuse me, each family member has their own section of the map and you can tackle them however you want.
Yeah.
They have their own individual stories in each section, but you can tackle them in whatever order you want.
I mean, you and I were both playing Dragon Age Origins recently. It does the same thing of giving you all these different areas, and they're all doing all those areas as an in service of uniting people to fight the Darkspawn is the idea. That's the central gameplay loop of that game. That's what your goal is. But you can go about it in any way you want.
I actually didn't think about that. That's a good example.
One of the more recent examples of a very different genre is Outer Wilds. Outer Wilds, the entire game is you just searching out and trying to figure out what's happening. Like, why is this happening to the world? And you can do that any way you want. You don't have any limitations. You can go wherever you want from the start. But the goal is to figure out what's happening. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to approach that kind of loop. And I think it usually works pretty well. Like all the games we just mentioned have gotten really good reviews and sold well. So
yeah,
it's definitely an interesting technique. Yeah. All right. So we've talked a lot about action RPGs, about Destiny-like games. I think another good genre to mention here is sandbox games, which 4X kind of counts as that, as well as one of the most popular games in the world, Minecraft, which absolutely fits into that loop of like, it's a game that you have no real goal in, but people spend so much time in it because it's just fun to play.
Yeah.
Which I think fits in with respecting the player's time.
It has a very similar loop to Destiny in that you're doing one thing in order to get this thing that allows you to do more things or do something better. It's like that small increment of power in order to get more power. It's just that they do them in very, very different ways.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I definitely think that ties in with respecting the player's time really well, and that games that people tend to stop playing are games that don't. So Destiny 2 is a good example of it. If you love Destiny 2's gameplay loop a lot, there isn't really anything that matches it. So you're going to keep playing the game. Like, if I want Destiny-style gunplay, I can't really go anywhere else and get that. Borderlands might be kind of close, but it's not what I want. Like, Bungie is just, like, masters at how they craft gunplay. And that's really the only game that offers such a polished experience of Bungie-style gunplay.
I will say, if Destiny isn't your thing and you're looking for something a bit more traditional from like a multiplayer aspect, I've been playing a lot of the most recent Modern Warfare, and I would say the gunplay there is, I mean, it's definitely a different kind of gunplay.
Exactly.
But in terms of like how well it's made, it's like on that same like top tier level.
Like there's a lot
You
of
know?
care put into it.
Yeah, it's great. It feels like visceral. All the weapons have a great punchy sound to it. It works really well.
I just think it's you don't play Modern Warfare if you want Destiny, and you don't play Halo if you want Call of Duty. So
Yeah.
if you love that gameplay loop, I think that's why Call of Duty does so well every year. Is it's the only game that has that polished of a arcadey yet still military themed shooter gameplay loop, which you can't really get anywhere else. That's why Morrowind is still doing well, because Morrowind is one of the only RPGs you can play that offers a Bethesda gameplay loop, but still has so much open-ended storytelling in it compared to something like Skyrim that people still play that game.
God, how they've fallen.
And then there's games, a lot of indie games now are approaching the market with that style of storytelling. So a popular game recently is Outward, which I don't know if anyone here has heard about. It's not super well known. It's essentially a RPG themed after a lot of the themes in Morrowind or the gameplay concepts of Morrowind, not the themes, where you can kind of go and do whatever you want. You have you're set loose in this world at the start, and you can kind of approach the different areas however you want. And it's also got some elements of Souls-likes, of the combat is very methodical and slow, and you have like not permadeath, but essentially you take damage and you don't heal it over time. You have to very carefully manage your health. But it has this really interesting element of storytelling in that there's no way to die in that game. You can't die. If you die, what happens is you get a defeat state, which will place you somewhere else on the map and be like, you were either rescued by a traveler or you got put up in prison and have to break out. You were captured by bandits, and so you need to find your stuff and essentially kill them to get out. It's all this different crazy bits of emergent storytelling that tend to be limited to stuff like multiplayer games like Gary's Mod that people do those like role-playing scenarios in, or roguelikes that have randomly generated content. So I think that it's unique that we're getting that kind of boon of games like that now.
Yeah, I think like with that overall theme of like respecting the player's time, I think what like the open world games in general, just because we've been talking about them so much, they have such a hard time with that because they have to have these massive worlds with tons of content going on, but inevitably because of the way that they're designed, you're going to have a lot of downtime of just going from one place to another, and that's when the clock starts. You notice the clock's ticking, and you're like, okay, this is taking a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I think Assassin's Creed Odyssey is a great example of that.
Oh boy.
Yeah, the reaction, the kickback to the open world is huge, but it's too big. Like there isn't enough worth doing to make it worth doing all the time, and the artificial limitations of them being like, you're not level 50, you can't do this quest yet, are just these weird barriers in a game that's so historically accurate that it's suddenly like, yeah, these guards at this place, they're they're gonna like kill you if they look at you, whereas I just wiped out an entire fortress on the other side of the map, so why can't I do the same thing here? Especially if I'm used to that from Assassin's Creed.
And it commits two of the biggest cardinal sins of like open world game design, which is one, it's so big, there's so many areas that just aren't used. Like they look pretty, but there's nothing in it. Like even Breath of the Wild.
Or just collectibles. Like they just put a few collectibles there and call it a day.
Yeah. Even Breath of the Wild has, maybe some Korok seeds and like a shrine out there. There's something there. And the second thing is it's so big that they had to stuff it full of just useless side quests. That's literally like it's down to a science. It's kind of crazy. You talk to someone, there's like a back and forth maybe 3 or 4 times. You go to a spot, you kill a bunch of people, or you pick up a thing, and then you bring it back to the person. 2 more exchanges of dialogue, done.
Yeah, it's very MMO-esque and how it handles that kind of thing.
It's and you would have all these side quests, and it would be bad, but like the problem is that they force you to do a lot of it in order to get through the main story. And it almost makes it that much worse that the main story is actually very interesting, especially for an Assassin's Creed game. And so the fact that you're stopping the pacing of a story that you're actually kind of invested in to do this useless chunk, I
mean, the story's really interesting. A lot of the side quests are interesting, but they're just not as engaging. Like if I want to finish the main story, I would rather be able to beeline that and finish it and then go back and do the side quests, but the way the game is structured makes you go and do that stuff so you can level up to then do the main story. Whereas in a game like Skyrim, like if I play Skyrim, I can do the quest lines in any order that I want, and the game will adapt to that. Yeah. Which I think is a good way to do that kind of thing, because if I want to do the main quest and to the point where I get shouts, I can do that, and then I can kind of pause it, or I can just beeline the entire main quest, finish it, and then go back to doing other things afterwards.
Yeah.
It's nice to have that choice. What was that, Alex?
Or you can completely neglect them.
Exactly. You can, if you don't want to be the Dragonborn, you don't have to be.
Yeah. I think one game that kind of gets rid of both of these issues, at least for me, I think Spider-Man does such a good job of getting rid of that useless time in between missions, because they did this really smart thing of going from mission to mission in the open world is almost as much fun as the mission itself. And so it feels like there's never a second where you're not engaged, because the swinging, even if it's really simple, it's like kind of one button with some, with some direction on the thumbstick. But it's so much fun and so visually pleasing to go from one mission to another that there's never a moment where you're just completely like detached from what you're doing, because it's so much fun to go from one spot to another. So in that respect, it's an open world game that has you travel from place to place, but it never wastes your time because you're having so much fun just getting there. And part of that is because they restrict it to just New York, right? Which is much smaller, but they were able to tightly pack it with a lot of detail and side missions, which I personally really enjoyed a lot.
Yeah, I think my biggest issue with Spider-Man, and this is a minor thing, like Spider-Man is a game that I love. I'm replaying it now. It's a lot of fun. It's gotten some great like free updates of like having a higher difficulty level and everything.
Costumes.
But, yeah, the costumes are fantastic. My biggest issue is that the map still feels very old school Ubisoft open world, and that everything has an icon. There's not really all that emergent stuff. Like, I think one of my favorite things about Breath of the Wild is that you have to mark the map yourself, aside from the shrines. So if you find an interesting thing, like maybe there's a sword here you want later, but you're not strong enough to take care of the camp there, you can mark it on your map and be like, I'll come back here later. Whereas
Spider-Man sort of has that, especially with the respect to how Breath of the Wild handles towers. You do the cop radar thing.
Yeah, but I think with Spider-Man, all the side quests and everything are marked automatically. If you have a crime going on, it tells you. You can't just like stumble upon it, which is something that I miss with it. Like, I wish there were times in that game where it would just be like something would happen and you didn't expect it.
I mean, there's only one example I could think of that. They have like randomized like cop and robber scenarios that you can engage with.
Yeah, but that's still on the map. That's still something that's very much told to you. Like, go here.
It's not at first. It kind of appears as you're playing. And the problem with that is that it becomes very much the same thing.
Exactly.
After a
That's
while.
what I mean.
Right.
It doesn't retain that newness that it could have had if like it's just something you run into.
Right.
Which is something that I love in games. Like, I think Red Dead 2 has a lot of those great events where you'll run into like this person just on the side of the road asking for help, or maybe they're trying to hold you up. And it's not relevant to the story. It doesn't really do anything, but it's a weird little event that you have this moment of being able to make a choice for your character. And Spider-Man doesn't really have any kind of moments like that, where it's not something that it's completely optional. It's not something that the map is telling you to go do. Whereas I think it's usually, for me, when I'm playing Spider-Man, if I choose to not help with a crime, it's because it's in the opposite direction.
Sure.
And it's telling me it's there.
I would say that Ubisoft, the way that they've designed their open worlds, does allow for that kind of sort of randomized emergent gameplay. Like, it's not nearly as interesting.
Well, Watch Dogs 2 has a lot of that.
Yeah, because in a lot of these Ubisoft open world games, there are usually multiple factions of enemies that are not just fighting you, but fighting each other. And so Far Cry 5, you have great moments where you have like what are they called? The Sons of whatever, like they're like the main cult villain, and they're fighting the other like citizens of Montana, and then all of a sudden you have a bear come in and he starts like fucking up everyone's shit, and it's just these cool like random moments that just kind of happen out of nowhere, and it's hilarious. or it just makes a fight way more engaging. We're like, okay, this is getting kind of boring, and then all of a sudden you just get like wild animal attacks that just like completely put a spin on what you were doing, and it was great.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good note to end on. We're over time again. We do this every week. I say
As
we're over
always.
time. In reality, we don't have a real time limit. It's just generally understood that we shouldn't be here for more than an hour and a half. So,
Out of respect to your time and ours.
yeah, see, it ties into the podcast
Hooray.
point. We don't have enough interesting things to say to go on for 3 hours. At least not yet.
Soon.
Oh, we will. We have
Oh,
an upcoming
eventually.
episode that'll probably be
Soon.
about 2 hours.
That Last
I'm
of Us
putting
talk
my
is going
foot
to
down.
be
Dude.
6 hours long.
I'm so excited.
That's
I'm so
fine
excited.
because the game was 23.
We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to talk about it. That's so. If you're curious what we're talking about, we do a Games Club podcast. Which, if you're on the podcast feed, you've seen these pop up. Where this podcast is normally spoiler free. Those will be full spoiler dives into various games. We're doing The Last of Us Part 2 right now, and we had to split that discussion into 2 parts because of how crazy that game is. So,
Yep.
if you're interested in hearing us talk about it, definitely check that out.
We had an entire hour and a half episode just talking about the leaks and the
Yeah.
marketing and the reviews, all that leading up to the game itself, which kind of hinted at our feelings on the game, but we tried to keep how we actually felt about the game to a minimum.
Yeah, but you can watch that if you want to know.
Yeah.
At this point, we do a closing out segment of our podcast. We do shout outs just to make everyone feel a little nicer about themselves now. Have some good vibes in the podcast zone. So who's ready? Who wants to start with their weekly shout out?
I got one. I had one before the podcast even started,
All right.
actually. Shout out to the weapon customization in Modern Warfare. I spent all day literally leveling up a light machine gun and then turned it into a full-on assault rifle because there's so much customization in the game, which is super cool.
Wow, nice.
Yeah.
You got a good one, Alex? I feel like you're chomping at the bit to tell us your story.
Oh go.
Let's
The sound of silence is a great shout out.
Sound
Um,
of silence.
I just had one.
Do you want us to loop back
Yeah,
around?
we'll
to
loop
maybe-
back.
we'll
Here's
loop
what I
back
got.
to Alex.
Shout out to real life gun customization because it was really expensive. And also shout out to my meat thermometer that I bought today. It connects to my phone and it tells me the temperature. It's instant read. It has a lot of cool stuff.
Wait, it connects to your
And-
phone?
Yeah, it's wireless.
Wow,
You have
Yeah,
a
it's fucking
smart
sick.
meat thermometer.
I have a smart meat thermometer. It's fucking
it's
awesome.
incredible.
It really is. And I'm gonna cook some sick meat on it at some point
Hell
in the
yeah.
near future. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Well, with it, not on it.
Yeah, I my shout out is I got to see Hamilton yesterday on Disney Plus.
Wow,
They're streaming it now,
that's
and it was
cool.
really really good.
The play?
Yeah, the musical. It's on Disney Plus now. They recorded. It's a recording from 2016, so it's not like a new version, but
Yeah.
it's got some
That's
nice
cool.
camera work. It's definitely a great way to experience it if you can't get
Very
tickets
cool.
because they're always sold out, and also nobody can go anywhere right now. That definitely
Yeah.
makes it difficult to see Hamilton. So, it's a good way to see Hamilton.
You know that little hurdle.
Yeah, the little hurdle of the giant pandemic going on. How about you, Alex? What was your loop back shout out?
Yeah, right. Shout out to me finally getting my switch back from my apartment.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Shout out
Nice.
again. No.
No, you can't do
I'm
that.
so tired.
No, you can't do that. There's only one.
No.
I
We
was
have
just gonna-
one
I
shout
was
out.
just
We have
gonna
one
go-
shout
I
out. If
was
we have
just-
more than one shout out, too many good vibes.
I was gonna start explaining my frustrations with firearms. But that's
Well,
not, I should start my own podcast for that.
that's a
I was
separate
gonna say
issue.
that's a different pod. Yeah.
There's a whole different demographic for that kind of jam.
So with that, I think we're ready to close out tonight. If you're listening to the podcast, leave us a review. If you're
Do
on
it.
podcasting apps,
Give us
like
a
and
like,
comment
like and
on
subscribe.
YouTube. Like and subscribe. If you don't know and
Um,
you're just listening to the feed, we record these live on Twitch, usually on Saturdays or Sundays. We also have a YouTube channel where we put some other stuff. You can see Wyatt and I reacting to Galaxy and Turmoil's demo if you want to see that. So you can
Not that
watch
there
that
was
too. All that
whole
is
lot to
linked in the
react to.
podcast description. Yeah, all of that is available in the descriptions. And again, shout out to our Irish audience. Wyatt and I talked about this. We have a
Amazing.
large portion of our audience is Irish, and I gotta
Really?
give props to that. I think it's because of the
Hell yeah.
times these podcasts go live are early morning for US, but afternoon for Ireland. So
Who cares?
Good
Welcome
time.
to the club.
yeah, welcome to the
Squad.
club.
I
That's
love
it. That's the podcast. We're
I
done.
love Jameson.
Have a
I
good
love
night,
Jameson.
everyone. Good morning, good day, wherever you are in the world.